who are suffering from environmental injustice. I assure you, I lived in Grosse Pointe. What happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. This is part of the dark underbelly of American society. The racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight, if you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days.
So the second debate in Detroit, so it'd be the fourth Democratic debate overall. The fourth Democratic debate wasn't very exciting at all. You didn't have any breakthrough candidacies. There are some interesting conversations. I think Tulsi got some good criticisms in on Kamala Harris, but really not that much happened. It was very boring. They talked about health care. They're talking about the same issues when we have, probably about 1,000 other issues that we need to talk about. So, let's get this conversation moving. So when it comes to the first debate, there's three clear winners. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, who are kung fu fighting all the, conservative, right-wing capitalists, pro-insurance, pro-health, pro-private health insurance, right-wing conservative Democrats. So they're kung fu fighting everybody else in their defense of Medicare for all. Marianne Williamson was opposed to Medicare for all, which is kind of shocking because her rhetoric is pretty much right on the money. She says we need to get away from the status quo, the conventional tactics aren't working, so we got to change pretty much, everything and anything. We need a spiritual awakening. So Marianne Williamson is going to warn the Democrats of dark days ahead if they don't get their shit together. Why would anybody vote for the Democrats if the Democrats aren't actually reaching out for the people that, typically you would think that they would care about? Working class people, the downtrodden, the minority groups. So Marianne Williamson had a pretty good answer when it comes to Flint, Michigan. They still got poison pipes. So Flint, Michigan doesn't give Michigan doesn't give a shit about their own people in Flint. They got all those lead in the pipes, so, they're just slowly killing that community off for the past 10 years. What was it, 20 years? How long ago was?
What's your response on the Flint water crisis?
My response on the Flint water crisis is that Flint is just the tip of the iceberg. I was recently in Denmark, South Carolina, where there is a lot of talk about it being the next Flint. We have an administration that has gutted the Clean Water Act. We have communities, particularly communities of color and disadvantaged communities all over this country.
So having Marianne Williamson in the debate is absolutely essential. We need a Marianne Williamson. The second debate without a Bernie Sanders, without a Mike Gravel, without a Marianne Williamson, what kind of conversation is this? So she's a little bit crazy, and she also doesn't believe in political policies, debating political policies or plans. She doesn't believe in planning for, achieving any of these goals.
We need to say it like it is. It's bigger than Flint. It's all over this country. It's particularly people of color. It's particularly people who do not have the money to fight back. And if the Democrats don't start saying it, then why would those people feel that they're there for us? And if those people don't feel it, they won't vote for us, and Donald Trump will win.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson.
Thank you.
So I just wanted a quick clarification about the lies that the Republicans keep on spouting. The Republicans are just shouting all this racist shit about reparations and decriminalization. While some of the candidates do believe in that, I just believe in the truth, okay? So let's actually talk about the reality of the situation. Now, you have some of the candidates. You got Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren believes in decriminalization, the illegally crossing of the American border. And she says that she believes in that because that's how we stop Donald from breaking up immigrant families and putting kids in cages. So instead of it being a jailable offense, it's now a ticketable offense. So it's still legal, but it's a civil violation instead of a criminal violation. So you can't put them in jail, but you can give them a ticket and then tell them to go to court. So Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren both believe in the decriminalization of the illegal crossing of the American border. Bernie Sanders does not believe in the decriminalization of crossing the American border. Bernie Sanders also doesn't believe in reparations. So when the Republicans are sitting there saying, oh, they're all for just illegals coming over here, taking our health care, taking our women, taking our food, taking this, taking that, They're lying. Bernie Sanders does not believe in the decriminalization of illegally crossing the border. He also doesn't believe in the reparations for black folks. Now, the progressives might not like that, right? I mean, like, what the hell's going on here? So you have Pete Buttigieg. He says, you know, both Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren, they are just...
I will sign into law a new Voting Rights Act. I will focus on education, address healthcare disparities, but I will also sign into law Sheila Jackson Lee's reparations bill so that we can have the national conversation we have waited too long in this country to have.
Thank you, Congressman Rourke. Speaking of reparations, Ms. Williamson, many of your opponents support a commission to study the issue of reparations for slavery. But you are calling for up to $500 billion in financial assistance. What makes you qualified to determine how much is owed in reparations?
Well, first of all, it's not $500 billion in financial assistance. It's $500 billion, $200 to $500 billion payment of a debt that is owed. That is what reparations is.
Changing the crime, it's still illegal. You cannot cross the border. That's a crime. That's a law. But instead of throwing that person in jail, they're going to do it, you know, civilly, which means they're going to give a ticketable offense. So I think for asylum seekers, it would make it easier for asylum seekers, but making, you know, just decriminalization for everybody, I'm not sure if that's such a great idea. Now, both Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg believe in the decriminalization of the border. So, you know, there's some arguments for that too. So how are we going to stop the separation of families and putting all these kids in cages? How are we going to stop that? So that's how Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren believe that we could do it. And Bernie Sanders does not believe in that. Bernie Sanders has actually a very precise and comprehensive immigration reform package. He's got lots of ideas when it comes to immigration, and I'll get to those a little bit later. So Bernie Sanders does believe in letting illegal immigrants get onto the Medicare for All program. And of course, why not? I mean, like, you don't want people spreading diseases all over the place. All Americans are going to be covered no matter what. You're an American citizen, you get, you know, government health care. So if you have an illegal immigrant that crosses into the country who has a sickness, I want to take care of that person. That also, in some respects, could be a way to deport them. So, you know, they have a disease, contain the disease, quarantine them, fix them, diagnose them, do what you can, and then, you know, now that you know that they're here illegally, then send them back for, you know, from which they came. Unless they're a legitimate asylum seeker, then, you know, process them into the United States of America.
Problem is 40 acres and a mule for every family of four. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars. And I believe that anything less than $100 billion is an insult. And I believe that $200 to $500 billion is politically feasible today because so many Americans realize there is an injustice that continues to form a toxicity underneath the surface, an emotional turbulence that only reparations.
Thank you very much. Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders, you don't think cash payments are the best way to address this issue, but according to a new Gallup poll, 73% of African Americans are in favor of cash payments to black Americans who are descendants of slaves. How do you respond to them?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I am supportive of Jim Clyburn's legislation, which is called 10-20-30. And what that understands is that as a result of slavery and segregation and
So Bernie Sanders isn't for reparations. Bernie Sanders isn't for the decriminalization of the crime of illegally crossing the continental 48 states American border, probably the other two states, and then also probably our, 1,000 territories and 900 military bases. So illegal terrorists, if they come through Canada, Bernie Sanders is he's going to put them in jail. And Bernie Sanders, when it comes to reparations for black folks, he's not going to cut black folks a check. He's not going to do it. What Bernie Sanders will do, he says he will sign a law to study the reparations question. This is Sheila Jackson's Reparations Commission. And in fact, when all these other candidates, they say they believe in reparations in some form or another, but that's, actually a little bit sketchy, to be honest with you. But they say that they believe in reparations. So do you believe in it? Yes. Now, what do they mean about that? Let's, dive into this a little bit more. So Beto O'Rourke, he also agrees with Sheila Jackson's reparations law. So this is, essentially Bernie Sanders' position, right? A reparations commission. So Bernie Sanders says he's opposed to reparations, but he's going to sign this reparations commission into, actualization, into law to make sure, that it gets passed. Sheila Jackson's reparation law forms a reparations commission. So whereas Beto O'Rourke says the exact opposite, Beto O'Rourke says he's for reparations, that's why he's passing the reparations commission law, whereas Bernie Sanders says he's not for reparations, and that's why so this reparations commission seems to be the, whatever the commission says about reparations, that seems to be the direction that either Beto O'Rourke or Bernie Sanders is going to go, because they're coming from the opposite direction. Beto O'Rourke says he believes in reparations, Bernie Sanders says he doesn't, but they both believe in getting Sheila Jackson's reparations commission passed into law, so we can, start to talk about this question and get a specific policy and, start passing out checks.
Policemen of the world. You said the exact same thing on a debate stage in 2016. If voters are hearing the same message from you and President Trump on the issue of military intervention, how should they expect that you will be any different from him?
Trump is a pathological liar. I tell the truth.
So, am I in favor of reparations? Am I for decriminalization of illegal crossings on the border? I am in favor of reparations. I am not in favor of illegal crossing of the border. I am for it. You want to stop the family separations. You want to stop the, kids being put into cages. Pass a law. Pass a law saying that that's illegal. You cannot separate, legitimate families that have, mother, wife, traditional kids. You cannot separate that family. And you cannot put children in cages by themselves. They must be put in, hotel or, something at home like, they got to, essentially be put into a nice place, not a jail. We're not putting children in jails, okay? We're not putting them in cages like they're, stray dogs who just need to be confined on a concrete floor and they're drinking out of the toilet. What the fuck? We don't, and then 7 of the kids have already died. We don't, so just pass a law. Pass a law saying if one of the kids die, then, charges need to be filed. Pass some laws just says that family separation, you can't do it. Nope, you can't do this family separation bullshit no more. Also, you can't do the, the children in cages.
We have been in Afghanistan, I think, 18 years, in Iraq, 16 or 17 years. We have spent $5 trillion on the war on terror, and there are probably more terrorists out there now than before it began.
Bernie's immigration policies here shortly, but I just want to mention quickly on reparations that Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Elizabeth Warren all have said yes to reparations. They all have, in some form or another, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke. They all said they believe in reparations. Do you believe in reparations? Yes. And what does that mean for Beto O'Rourke? It was passing Sheila Jackson's reparation law, which, forms a reparations commission, which is Bernie Sanders' position, but he's opposed to reparations. I am in favor of reparations. So when it comes to reparations, there's only one candidate, I believe, that's 100% through and through going to get reparations for the black folks of America, and that's Marianne Williamson. She's the only one that's going to do it. So the Republicans, what they're doing is they're just taking the extreme positions of all the candidates, and they're trying to, paint them all up with one brush. Just one great big insanity extremist, brush. They believe in this, and they believe in that, and they believe in, no, when it comes to Bernie Sanders' race policies, they're moderate, okay? So he believes there's some things he wants to do, and when it comes to Bernie Sanders' immigration policies, those are moderate too. When it comes to his race and his immigration policies and his economic policies, he's a moderate. His economic policies is the same as Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Republican. So his 90%, Eisenhower's 90% tax rate, marginal tax rates, this was straight, this is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower built all these public schools. He built all these bridges and roads. The entire interstate system is built because of Dwight D. Eisenhower. He hated communists. He was the Mr. Anti-Communist. I think he passed an act. He's the one that started, essentially just hating on the communists. So Dwight D. Eisenhower he hated, communism. He hated
cut where 83 cents of every dollar goes to the very, very richest among us that does not stimulate the economy. If we get rid of this college debt, think of all the young people who will have the discretionary spending. They'll be able to start their business. The best thing you could do to stimulate the U.S. economy is to get rid of this debt. This is not just about a plan to do it, it's about a philosophy of governing. And I've heard some people here tonight, I almost wonder why you're Democrats. You seem to think there's something wrong about using the instruments of government to help people. That is what government should do. All policy should help.
So Bernie Sanders' immigration policies are as follows, okay? So he believes that we need a secure border, and we also need to take care of the humanitarian crisis. He does not believe that asylum is to be criminalized. So if they are asking for asylum, that is much different than illegally crossing. So he does not believe asylum should be criminalized, which it should not. He had a father and an uncle. He came from Poland. So, you know, he's a Jewish immigrant. He comes from Polish Jewish immigrants. His father and his uncle are going to escape Poland before Nazi Germany, and they survived and they were able to, you know, create a family. But the family that stayed in Poland, they were exterminated by Nazi Germany. So only Bernie Sanders' father and his uncle survived by immigrating to America. So he understands, you know, people are coming to this country to, you know, run away from repressive conditions for legitimate asylum reasons. He's totally in favor of, you know, providing a safe refuge for people like his father and his uncle. They came from Poland without a nickel in their pocket. And, you know, the rest of Bernie's family murdered, every single one of them, just, you know, chopped down and killed by the Nazis, by Nazi fucking Germany. So where are the, you know, rest of the Sanders? They were all cut down. Bernie is, you know, he's the head of what, maybe 20? So there's only 20 Sanders left. So he understands families and the importance of family and the importance of having a compassionate immigration policy. Now, many illegal people are here. Many illegal immigrants are in America because they overstayed their short-term visas. Many of the illegal immigrants come into the United States by invitation, so they fly into America on an airplane here from France or Germany, and they're only supposed to be here for 6 weeks, but they, you know, just dunk and stay on the lam. They don't leave. Right, so a lot of immigrants are actually legally coming here and, you know, by plane. So a wall isn't going to stop any of that. Bernie Sanders' comprehensive list of immigration policies, he may want to abolish ICE, which I, you know, really like. He didn't vote for the creation of ICE, and he also says we need to restructure ICE. So I think that could lead into the
We're going to
abolition.
spend, the Congress passed, and I will not vote for, a $715 billion military budget, more than the 10 next countries combined.
And meant the, you know, the abolishment of ICE. Now, he also wants more long-term visas. I think that's a good idea, too. So 6 weeks, and then you're only here for 6 weeks, and then you got to go. So have less short-term visas, more long-term visas. If they're allowed to stay longer, then, you know, maybe they might stay, but I feel like they won't break the short-term visas anymore because, you know, they won't have the short-term visa. They'll have the long-term visa. So they can stay for college for 4 years, for example. And then hopefully, you know, by being here with college, their experience is good, then 4 years. I don't know. Hopefully, you know, they're not running away from oppression and persecution either. But I think that's a good idea. So I like all these ideas. Maybe abolish ICE, more long-term visas, end mass immigration raids, enforce fair farm worker labor laws, end mass deportation, get comprehensive immigration reform. That's the big one. That term can mean anything, really, so be careful. But comprehensive immigration reform, we've got 11 million illegal immigrants in this country, 15,000 illegal immigrants coming up over the border. So he believes in border security, but he also believes in humanitarian. So he's going to include a pathway to citizenship for most of the 11 million illegal immigrants in the continental 48 United States. He's going to expand the Dreamers program. He's going to end family separation and child detention and immigrant concentration camps along our southern border. He's going to establish independent oversight of Homeland Security. He's going to ensure farm workers, regardless of immigration status, can safely report workplace and human rights violations and abuses. That's the only one that I had some concern about. So he's saying that farm workers, whether they're here legally or illegally, can come and safely report, any violence or any crime or workplace human rights violations and abuses. So while, the compassionate side of me says, of course, but the, sensible side of me says we need a comprehensive immigration reform like yesterday. So we need a comprehensive immigration reform. We need to get on the same page. So as Americans, are we going to be, just lovey-dovey and accept everybody? Or are we just going to be a bunch of mean assholes and just kick everybody out? Or are we going to do something in between? Whatever the fuck it is we're going to do, pass that law. Pass that law so that way we're all on the same page. You should pass an immigration law every 10 fucking years just to remind us, hey, yeah, we're still doing, remember that thing where we just kick everybody out? Yeah, we're still doing that thing. Remember that thing where we just take everybody in? Yeah, we're still doing that. Or remember that nice balanced approach, that right, nice in the middle, you care about the individual and the community, you have a heart and you have a brain, and you take a nice balanced approach. Isn't that a better way just to be? Isn't that just a better way to exist on this planet?
Thank you, Mayor Buttigieg. Senator Sanders, you want to forgive all student loan debt? Your response?
Matter of fact, I do. But before I get into that, the major issue that we don't talk about in Congress, we don't talk about in the media, is the massive level of income and wealth inequality in America. You got 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom 90%. You got top 1% that owns more wealth than the bottom 92%, 49% of all new income goes to the top.
So I'm going to read them backwards, just because I believe that precision matters. So he's got, a very progressive immigration policy. He's going to end the mass, deportations. He's going to end the mass immigration raids. That's very much like the Nazi stormtroopers bullshit, right? Just sending, everybody and then everybody getting arrested and everybody just kind of being treated like shit. So he's going to have comprehensive immigration reform, which includes the pathway to citizenship. So this is, in mass deportation, in mass immigration, enforce fair farm worker labor laws for legal migrants. I agree. For illegal migrants, I want an immigration, law. So that's the first thing. I think that's probably the most important thing. He wants to expand the Dreamers program. So if you've, basically lived here as a child your entire life, then you're an American, whether you're born here specifically or not. If you come here at 1 year of age, then that means you get to stay in America. You went to American schools, you have American house, and you had American neighbors and American experience. That means you're going back to a country you don't even know about. So yes, definitely expand the Dreamers. Hopefully abolish ICE, more long-term visas, and then you also have the independent oversight of Homeland Security. All these Bush-era policies do need to be rescinded, and Homeland Security, they're running this shit show, so yeah, they definitely need to be, all of the damn departments need some independent oversight, so that's actually just a common sense solution to Homeland Security. There's also, the Patriot Act, and there's a bunch, all these damn wars, so a lot of shit came out of the, baby Bush era that needs to end. And then also ensure farm workers, whether they, are illegal or not, that they can safely report workplace and human rights violations and abuses. I don't want crimes and, for illegal immigrants to be abused. What I want is just a comprehensive immigration law which would say criminals got to go, most of the people get a pathway to citizenship, and then some people get outright legalization. So the comprehensive immigration reform would end up being balanced. Those are the parameters, right? Just being total dicks or just being total pushovers. And so the balanced approach is going to be the bulk of that bill. The Democrats, Republicans need to get on something. Right now, I guess we're just doing whatever Donald Trump's executive order is. But Bernie Sanders is going to, it's going to be so much better. He's going to add all these different elements to it. So the only thing that I see that, may go too far is allowing illegal immigrants to report crimes without getting deported. Now, I don't want them to get hurt and get injured, but if they're going to the authority figure.
What we need is a foreign policy that focuses on diplomacy, ending conflicts by people sitting at a table, not by killing each other. As President of the United States, I will go to the United Nations and not denigrate it, not attack the UN, but bring countries together in the Middle East and all over the world to come to terms with their differences and solve those problems peacefully. The United
Thank you,
States
Senator.
cannot be the policeman of the world.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, how do you respond to Senator Sanders' vision for America's role in the world?
Well, we share the recognition of the incredible cost. People don't realize that half the soldiers that fought in Iraq and Afghanistan were National Guard. And so I went and sent them off on their deployments, big, noisy hangars, but I also mourned with their families when they didn't come back.
And they're giving their name and their information, and we know that they're here illegally. It just seems kind of crazy that you wouldn't handle that situation too. So it seems, I don't know, I mean, maybe you could have some sort of way that you could show some mercy. If you're here illegally and you report a crime, then that will be noted in your file, and so when they discuss if you're going to stay for a pathway to citizenship, if you're here for asylum reasons, or, if you are just here having a party and enjoying all of our free services just for the fuck of it, to have extreme vetting. And I'm not against that term, extreme vetting. Extreme vetting, yeah, everybody should be extremely vetted. So not just in terms of crime, but for diseases too. My God, I don't want, a bunch of crazy-ass diseases coming into America. We got herd immunity, so not everybody's getting all the vaccinations that are actually out there, because most of us have pretty good immune systems, just because, we all live together. So, but there could be smallpox. There could be some sort of outbreak that we're not immune to. And I don't want to chance that. I don't want to say, okay, maybe yellow fever. Maybe yellow fever might be the, so I think diseases and criminals, I don't want those folks in my country. Now, with the crime, with the background check, it's also the state and the government and the police. That could also be a case for asylum, that they're being repressed. So, yeah, they say that, I'm a criminal, but their trumped-up charges, really, they're the oppressors, and so that could be, that could go either way, too. So the criminals, the actual people, the MS-13, those people that want to come in here and do people harm, fuck those people. Deport them, don't let them come in. Everybody's allowed to ask for asylum, so I think we should have like a nice big desk, in immigration, those checkpoint centers or whatever, so people could come up, and at the very least they could say, can I apply for asylum? And then that's it. So, that would begin the process if they're there legitimately, which is what Bernie Sanders believes. If you're here for just asylum reasons, that's not a criminal offense. But you have to, paperwork get processed, and so you could, turn in your application, but then you're going to have to figure out, where you're going to stay. You're going to have to stay in, on the Mexican side for maybe a couple weeks or months. Hopefully it's an expedited, process. I've heard people actually, I think it was Bernie talking about getting more judges. So getting more judges, and I don't know, it's just the judicial branch worries the shit out of me, but they're saying to hurry up with the asylum cases, get more judges, so the judges are quickly looking at the cases and making determinations of who is worthy of asylum and who is not.
We're going to move on to the issue of immigration now. There is widespread agreement on this stage on the need for immigration reform, a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, including Dreamers, but there are some areas of disagreement. Mayor Buttigieg, you're in favor of getting rid of the law that makes it a crime to come across the U.S. border illegally. Why won't that just encourage more illegal immigration?
When I'm president, illegally crossing the border will still be illegal. We can argue over the finer points of which parts of this ought to be handled by civil law and which parts ought to be handled by criminal law, but we've got a crisis on our hands. And it's not just a crisis of immigration, it's a crisis of cruelty and incompetence that has created a humanitarian disaster on our southern border. It is a stain on the...
So Bernie Sanders has a very progressive immigration, policy. His immigration policy is incredible. So he doesn't believe in decriminalizing border, crossers who cross illegally, but, his immigration policy is extremely progressive. We need to get some sort of comprehensive immigration reform passed yesterday. So with the Bernie Sanders administration, he's going to clean up the immigration crisis. And I think if we're actually forced to come together with a president that gives a shit, then we would actually come up with some good shit. Immigration bills need to be passed every 10 years. This is the immigration law of America for the 2020s, for the 2030s, and so on and so forth. So you have Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Elizabeth Warren all saying that they believe in reparations. What's the truth of that? How far do they believe in reparations? Because Bernie Sanders doesn't believe in reparations, but they all agree with this Sheila Jackson. So Sheila Jackson has a reparations commission bill. And not all of them said that they support it. Beto O'Rourke says he supports it, and Bernie Sanders says he supports it. So you have people that both agree with reparations and disagree with reparations, saying Sheila Jackson's reparation commission needs to, come into play and needs to develop into, fruition. It needs to blossom and bloom into actually being a real commission, and then the reparations question can be discussed. So Marianne Williamson was right to criticize the commission. We don't just need a commission, we need to do it. So Marianne Williamson is probably the only person that truly believes in reparations from the pit of her stomach and deep down in her heart. So Marianne Williamson, just through and through, is definitely going to get reparations. These other candidates, so you got Kamala Harris. She's got the reparations, which is the LIFT Act. That's her version of reparations, passing the LIFT Act. Well, that's not reparations. And then you got Cory Booker, who says his baby bonds program will help end the racial wealth gap. And I think baby bonds is a college check. Every American gets $1,000 when they're born. And so he's just saying we're investing in that child's future. So it's almost kind of like, it's not universal basic income, but everybody gets a $1,000 check upon their birth. And so, I don't know about his baby bonds position. I want to find out more about that, and I will, and probably do a video on it.
Companies like Amazon and billionaires out there do not pay one nickel in federal income tax. And we've got 500,000 people sleeping out on the street. What we need is a political revolution that tells these billionaires and corporate America that they are Americans, they'll participate in our society, but they have got to start paying their fair share of tax.
And then Elizabeth Warren says that she supports legislation that would help minorities get a down payment on a home. That's her reparations, right? So legislation to help minorities get a down payment on a home. So, what is that, grant monies or subsidies, or is that, somehow, I don't know what that is. So I guess that's what that would be, right? So she's for passing out money for black folks and brown folks to help them get a down payment on a home. Is that reparations? That could be reparations. That could be how reparations, what it turns into, or it could be the baby bonds that Cory Booker's talk about, or it could be Kamala Harris's LIFT Act. The LIFT Act, they said this, which is sort of crazy to me, that the LIFT Act, which is Kamala Harris's own bill, it offers middle-class families a massive expansion of the earned income tax credit. So a tax credit just means they're not going to tax you, so you're not actually getting any money, you're just not being taxed. So by cutting the taxes of the middle-class families, that's going to help, according to Kamala Harris, a bunch of poor black families, 60% in fact. So the vast majority, the majority of black folks are going to be pulled out of poverty because middle class is going to get a tax cut. I assume the earned income tax credit would probably go for poor folks too, if they know how to do it and they know that this tax credit is there, so they get taxed less. But do poor folks? How much do they really get taxed anyways? So
activity that cannot be allowed to continue.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Congressman, your response.
Well, yeah, I would just say, I didn't say we couldn't get there till 2040, Bernie. You don't have to yell. All I'm saying is...
none of these are reparations. Cory Booker is probably closest to reparations by saying everybody gets a $1,000 check, upon birth. Elizabeth Warren is saying that, that maybe they'll get a $1,000 check to put a down payment on a home. But these are just one-time checks, right? And it's not like $10,000 to $20,000. So I think that's what, $20,000 check. I don't know. I want to do the math on, what would $500 billion divided amongst the native or the African Americans of America. So how much would that be? If there's a $500 billion reparations package, how much money does each and every African American get? And so that's, I think that that's a reasonable, actually. We're actually getting off easy when it comes to what? Now we're forgiving about slavery. Now black folks can't bitch about slavery no more. Nope. We paid you for slavery. So there's, we're in a new post-racial generation. And so now we're going to deal with the institutional racism, but we're going to, carry forward with our rainbow selves, with our rainbow rebellion, with our rainbow revolution. So it's not just white or black or brown, all colors of everybody, multicultural pluralism. That's the society that is best for white America. It shows how good white America is, that they say, yes, of course, all the other races are just like white people. Of course they're the same. I mean, Martin Luther King died because he said we should judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. That's some obvious common sense shit.
Here is the bottom line. We've got to ask ourselves a simple question. What do you do with an industry that knowingly, for billions of dollars in short-term profits, is destroying this planet? I say that is criminal.
So I've talked about Bernie Sanders' immigration policies. What's going to be his policies for black folks? I always thought that was an interesting question. So I was campaigning for Nader, and somebody had asked,
why isn't this sweeping plan to fight the climate crisis realistic?
Well, first of all, because it ties its progress to other things that are completely unrelated to climate, like universal health care, guaranteed government jobs, and universal basic income. So that only makes it harder to do. My plan, which gets us to net zero by 2050, which we absolutely have to do for our kids and our grandkids.
So Bernie Sanders is going to do a bunch of things. He's going to do things to create more farmers. He's got these new farmer programs which would help black folks. His 3 big free would help black folks: free college, free health care, free child care. So he's going to end the war on drugs. So there's a lot of the general America problems, or the general America policies, that would help black folks too, right? You lift America up, then you would think black folks would come up too. So what specifically is he going to do for black folks? He does have some things. I mean, he's been on the right side of race issues for a long time, but my point is that he's a moderate, okay? So he wants to get more payment for black colleges. So he wants to increase funding for black colleges. And the reason... So, he's got all these essentially payments, or all these programs, which are going to be payments for America, not universal basic income. So nobody's going to get a damn check. We're all going to get universal health care, universal college, universal child care. The war on drugs is going to end. The war in general is going to end. Marijuana is going to get legalized. So do black folks like those policies? I like those policies. And so I would assume that, there's going to be other people out there like me, white, brown, or black, who's going to agree with those are progressive policies and it helps all Americans. So, that's one of his arguments. Essentially, he's got all these general American...
Why should the U.S. tie its own hands with that policy?
Because it makes the world safer. The United States is not going to use nuclear weapons preemptively, and we need to say so to the entire world. It reduces the likelihood that...
But Bernie Sanders is going to do some things specifically for black folks. So, he's going to increase funding for black colleges, so that's, something. He's also going to be focused on poor white, black, and brown areas. So essentially he's saying that his focus on inequality, his war on poverty programs, are going to help many poor black folks out. So Bernie Sanders specifically supports a Jim Clyburn bill. Jim Clyburn, I guess, is some representative from somewhere in the United States, that the bill focuses federal resources on poor communities. By giving more money to poor communities, you're going to help poor white, brown, and black communities. So again, because he's, having a general American plan, therefore black folks are being uplifted along with everybody else. Now, you've never seen Bernie Sanders ever falter when it comes to issues on race. I think he's, very thoughtful when it comes to immigration and race. And while progressives might want him to be in favor of reparations and for decriminalizing illegal border crossings, maybe some progressives don't want that, right? I'm okay with reparations. I'm not okay with the illegal crossing of the border. I think that for right now, a law to decriminalize it, just to take the power out of Donald Trump's hands, is a good idea, but ultimately that's just going to increase, immigration, illegal immigrants. So clearly, what needs to happen, I already said it, but we need to pass a law saying you can't separate families and you can't put children into boxes or concentration camps or jail cells with, cold-ass conditions. They has to be livable conditions. So that has to be a law. Pass it to where all children get to be put in livable conditions and families are not separated.
Someone miscalculates, someone misunderstands. Our first responsibility is to keep ourselves safe. And what's happening right now with Donald Trump, as they keep expanding the different ways that we have nuclear weapons, the different ways that they could be used, puts us all at risk. We talk about what's happening around the world. I have 3 older brothers who served in the military. I see that they would do anything. Our military is the best on earth. But
So Bernie Sanders, he's been on the right side of the civil rights era. He's been fighting for black folks since the civil rights era. When it came to saying that black people are people too, he was right there on the front lines. So that had been, excruciating. That had been very unpopular, and a lot of hatred had been pointed at the white guy that was saying, that they're people too. So when the Black Lives Matter movement, when those 2 young black women who were a part of what they called Black Lives Matter, they sabotaged Bernie's public speaking engagement the first time that he ran in 2016. And Bernie Sanders wasn't like a Donald Trump. He didn't threaten them. He didn't say, just toss them out or just, get them out of here. He didn't say anything like that. What actually Bernie Sanders did was he stepped aside. And he wasn't in center stage, and he let the young black women have the microphone because Bernie Sanders believes that young black women, they deserve to be heard. So he let those young black women speak. So Bernie Sanders is very much a friend of black people, and he's also, all the programs that I just mentioned, they will help white people, they will help black people too, guaranteed, 100%. And so if, I guess the question bothers me because it's sitting there saying, what more do I get because I'm black? And, the reparations, I like, maybe we should get reparations. So Bernie would just get reparations and then it would be okay. Now we're on the same footing, right? Now we've, went ahead and swept that slavery thing off to the side. So now we can begin to talk as equals. And that's what Malcolm X said, actually. In order to solve racism, just get a white person and black.
We need some deep truth-telling when it comes. We don't need another commission to look at evidence. I appreciate what Congressman O'Rourke has said. It is time for us to simply realize that this country will not heal. All that a country is a collection of people. People heal when there's some deep truth-telling. We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with. That great injustice has had to do with the fact that there was 250 years of slavery followed by another 100 years of domestic terrorism. What makes me qualified to say $200 to $500 billion? I'll tell you what makes me qualified. If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 4 to 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 to 5, and they were all
person in the room and have them talk to each other without either one of them getting their feelings hurt. And we'll learn so much more by doing that. So we should have these Malcolm X conversations all over the place. And so Bernie Sanders, he's going to fund, black colleges. That's something specific that, black colleges, historical black colleges. So they're going to get more funding. So that's something, right? Now, for Bernie Sanders supporters, some people complain that they're so extreme and passionate. I think it's very important for us to be good stewards of Bernie Sanders, be good ambassadors for Bernie Sanders. So a lot of the fans and supporters, they don't define, their candidate, but I take it serious. I think that a Bernie Sanders supporter needs to be on their best behavior. This is the second chance that we got at this. We had a really shitty candidate, and so you had to smash people and you had to smash their arguments. But I think now with this diversified field, picking some progressives, Bernie's the best. Bernie, we're all going to vote for Bernie. Bernie's the best. But by just saying they all suck and they're all crappy, people that like these other candidates are not going to believe you. They're not going to believe anything you say. You're just trying to get them to hate somebody. We don't want them to hate anybody. All we want them to do is love Bernie Sanders so much that they will vote for them. So as soon as someone says, I love Bernie Sanders so much, I will vote for him, just shut the fuck up. Don't piss that off. That's a sale, We've got to vote on our side. So we got to be strategic about this. And when there's only about 5 that's mostly progressive on the stage anyways, Tulsi Gabbard, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, I like Jay Inslee a little bit, Marianne Williamson. So you only got, out of the 25, less than 10. So, and maybe about 5 or 6, progressives that are mostly progressive. Elizabeth Warren is a capitalist. She was Republican for half her life, so she's very right-wing in a lot of things. And so that shouldn't be shocking. She's 67, so she's old school, right? So Elizabeth Warren is a capitalist, but she's one of the most liberal progressives in America.
People thrive. That is how we will have peace, and that is how we will have prosperity.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Congressman O'Rourke, you don't support free four-year college. Your response to Ms. Williamson?
I support free 2-year college. Earn that associate's degree, realize your full potential, debt-free 4-year college. But unlike some of the other candidates on the stage, that's not just for tuition. That is room and books and board, the full cost of being able to better yourself so that you can better this country. And then for that school teacher who in many places like Texas is working a second or a third job, full forgiveness for her outstanding student loan debt, forgiveness for that person willing to work at the VA and serve our former service members, and we do not do that at the expense of...
That should tell you something, too. She's a capitalist, and she's one of the biggest liberal progressives. So I think she is probably more of a socialist capitalist if she was being, honest. But for whatever reason, she's only claiming capitalism, and so therefore, is she going to cut social programs? Is she just going to, she's a capitalist, so we're going to do everything in the name of capitalism. So free health care because it's going to be good for capitalism? How about it's just good for the lives of the American people, Elizabeth Warren? So my whole point is just that there's, they're all to the right of Bernie. Bernie's the best out of all these candidates. So by just shitting on all of them, do criticize, them for their right-wing neoliberal policies, but also say when they're doing good or when they speak about issues that you agree with. My God, just wanting to hate that's not what I want at all. You have all these other candidates. So the best thing. And the reason why Bernie supporters are so passionate, we didn't reform the DNC. We changed the DNC. We almost got rid of the superdelegates, but we still got the superdelegates. The goddamn superdelegates are still there. So that means the first person to get 51% in the first round in the Democratic convention, that's who's going to win. If one person doesn't get 51%, then it's going to go on to the second round of voting. And then the superdelegates get to vote in the second round. So we were able to reform the DNC just a little bit, which means for a lot of Bernie supporters that he's got to be number 1 on the first round of voting. He's got to get 51%. So that means everybody's got to be smashed. Everybody has to be, they're terrible, horrible, awful people. But ultimately, when I look at all of them, Bernie Sanders is just clearly the one that shines the best. Bernie Sanders shines better than all the rest. And so by, shitting on another progressive, Elizabeth Warren is very progressive. Elizabeth and Bernie liked each other. Elizabeth and Bernie were kung fu fighting all those, conservative Democrats. So to sit there and just, shit on Elizabeth or just...
I think that all domestic and international policy should be based on the idea that anything we do to help people thrive is a stimulation to our economy. That's how you stimulate your economy. So if a few people take advantage, but there are 4 or 5 people who are going to take the money that they then have in the bank. When you look at this $1.5 trillion college debt, this is why I agree with Bernie, or I would be, okay, why don't we swap it? We had a $2 trillion...
Shit on Bernie because you like one or the other, that's insane. We got more things that unite us than separate us. And by, talking about Elizabeth Warren's good qualities, maybe the person that wants to vote for Elizabeth Warren, they'll hear you because you're actually saying she's not a bad person, she's not evil, she's not wicked, she's not the devil, she's not the worst human being on the planet, but, there's some policies that concern you about her. And so they would be more apt to listen to you, and then you could also share your criticisms. It's a praise sandwich, right? So let's say something good about Elizabeth Warren. She was very passionate, and she believes in Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All program. She also believes in the 2-cent tax on the wealthy for anybody making $50 million or over. She wants a 2-cent tax on them. She wants to decriminalize. She wants to end the, breaking up of families and children at the border. So she has very, a bunch of progressive platform, a bunch of platform planks that are very, progressive. I can admit that. Without, compromising my love for Bernie or my commitment to getting Bernie Sanders elected. And so her nuclear policy, the no first-use nuclear policy, I love that about, Elizabeth Warren. The problems that I have There's, she's a capitalist, which means she's right-wing. That's a Republican. That's a Republican position. And my position isn't Republican or Democrat. I feel I'm right in between these two, essential extreme economic. We only got capitalist and, communist, right? So probably, a meeting in the middle. I mean, I feel like that. Haven't we already solved this? We're going to have public schools and roads and libraries and cops. So we have some government. But we're also going to have a pro-corporate environment, so you have corporations and government. You have both, right? So kind of a 50-50 thing, half of it government, half of it corporations. That seems all right. The government represents everybody, so I want everybody to be represented by government. So if we all had corporations, maybe that would be, maybe that's how you're supposed to succeed in corporate America. You have to, become a corporation before you become a person.
Should not be asking our military to take on jobs that do not have a military solution. We need to use our diplomatic tools, our economic tools, and if we're going to send someone into war, we better have a plan for how.
So I hope you don't meet any of these, Bernie Sanders assholes. They want Bernie Sanders to get elected, so they think that by hating everybody else that, and I want to get Bernie Sanders, the people, Berners and Bernie bros and sisters, I want all the people that support Bernie Sanders to just be more nuanced with the way that they're talking about this. They're not, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's an evil piece of shit. John Delaney's an evil piece of shit. Tim Ryan and, all these conservative Democrats are, what the fuck are you even doing in this race? So the neoliberals, the people shit on the neoliberal ideas, protect the progressive ideas. Don't throw the progressive out with the neoliberal bathwater. So when you have Kamala Harris, she wants to legalize marijuana. Kamala Harris is, in favor of busing. So there's some things that's progressive about her. Tulsi Gabbard, she wants to legalize marijuana, end the war on drugs, end all these regime change wars. So there's several things that's progressive about Tulsi. So you could point out the progressive issues of these other candidates, make your own determination, but I think that there are some candidates that have more progressive views than neoliberal views. And if they're more progressive than, conservative, right-wing, Republican, neoliberal, which is how the Democrats have been acting since Bill Clinton.
Institutional racism we see now in healthcare, in education, in financial services. We are going to have to focus big time on rebuilding distressed communities in America, including African-American communities. In terms of education, I also have a plan. It's called the Thurgood Marshall Plan, and it would focus on...
If they are these, right-wing, conservative, neoliberals, chuck them out. But if they have more progressive ideas than neoliberal ideas, that makes them a progressive, which means they're a friend of ours, and perhaps they could work in Bernie Sanders' cabinet. So think outside the box. Don't just shit on everybody. Do criticize, the shitty ideas and point out, why you are, skeptical about their presidency. But just being dicks to everybody, I don't like that. I think we should be better ambassadors for Bernie Sanders. So I think it's better for, to get Bernie Sanders elected, it's better to be more nuanced. So just to shit on everybody? No. There's a lot of progressives that's in the race, like 5 or 6. So that's not a ton, it's not a bunch. So I reject, 15 to 20 of them. All right, 20 of them suck ass, but there's 5 progressives in there. So let's listen to the progressives, and let's just have, a nice discussion of ideas. So that's essentially, I want to have a good discussion of ideas. So this is a campaign of ideas. Who's got the best ideas? And hopefully Bernie Sanders is great, and then he takes all the best ideas from everybody else. So that makes Bernie even more Bernier. That makes Bernie Sanders even greater. And isn't that what we're trying to do with America? Make great America even greater?
Ending the growth of segregated schools in America. It would triple funding for Title I schools. It would make sure that teachers in this country earned at least $60,000 a year.
Senator Sanders, thank you very much.
That's the whole point of relationships, is to encourage us to each other to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. So great America can become greater. Great Bernie can become greater. We all can improve. We can all get better. And that's progress, right? That's the definition. So the Berners get, a second pitch, and 2 strikes, you're out, right? So we must get this right. We've got to get this right. And that's, please forgive people that might go too far. And I know there's going to be people that says, like, Bernie is the solution, because Bernie is the fucking solution. But I think we could have a better, polite, more, the talk of politics should be water cooler talk, so we could be more civil and polite, but also remain firm in what we truly believe. So Kamala Harris, has some progressive views. Tulsi Gabbard has progressive views. Pete Buttigieg has progressive views. Marianne Williamson has progressive views.
We're going to get them out on the other end.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Bullock, your response to Senator Warren's proposal to the U.S. never use a nuclear weapon first?
I wouldn't want to take that off the table. I think America's strength, we have to be able to say that. Look, never, I hope, certainly in my term or anyone else, would we really even get close to pulling that trigger. But by the same token, America's strength.
And, Cory Booker has progressive views. So all those candidates, we should, recognize that they have, I think they're progressives. I think they have more progressive views than neoliberal views. So at the very least, give credit where credit is due for their progressive ideas. But I'm not gonna shit on a fellow progressive. A fellow progressive is an ally of mine. And we're going to work together, after Bernie Sanders becomes president, or we could convince them eventually to come over to our side. So I feel like just being dicks to each other, sometimes that's the last resort, okay? If somebody just will not, get away from their racism, well, you're a racist piece of shit. That's why I'm voting for Bernie Sanders, because I'm sick of you racist pieces of shit just being racist and stupid. So then you could get, shitty. But, I think a better, more civil, have a civil society, work towards a civil society. Bernie Bros could work towards a civil society, should, ought to, need to work towards a civil society for the sake of this country, for the sake of the survival of our nation in this universe, in the Milky Way. The universe is expanding, and we got billions of galaxies and then billions of stars per galaxy. That's a lot of fucking stars.
No one on the stage is talking about, though, the Republicans won't even acknowledge that climate change is real, Deanna.